So, volume 5 was it was good. It was good. Great? Maybe. Anyway, unlike last time, I finished volume 8. In this particular volume, I actually did finish while taking notes. So I'm just going to essentially transfer my notes to the script. And if you don't hear me talk about something, that means I didn't care enough to write it down and jot it down in my notes. For instance, Ayana Koji's interactions with Manabu during the volume, I didn't write any of that down. I didn't particularly care for it. I didn't find it all that important necessarily to speak upon. But if you want to just hear my thoughts on something, just comment down below. But other than that, let's just get straight into the review of Classroom of the Elite Volume 9. So, Volume 9, like always, first starts off with Ichinose soliloquy. We're looking forward to her backstory because of the way she's depicted in Sadness, especially throughout the amalgamations of volumes from, I think it's Volume 4, is when we started to get a little bit of hints up until this current volume. So reading through her soliloquy and learning more about her, I got really hyped. But one thing I must address is how the story switched from first person perspective, which it always holds, to a third person perspective storytelling. I'm not sure if it's a translated problem or what, or if the story in Japanese is switching up its perspective, but going from first person to third person was just a bit jarring and kind of weird, but it's whatever. I eventually got over it. After Ichinose soliloquy, we have the meetup and interaction between two of my favorite oppositions, Nagumo, who is looking to be pretty promising villain for Classroom the Elite, and Sakinagi, who looks equally as promising, whereas she is the direct antagonist to Ayana Koji. The two had a meeting where Sakinagi asked for permission to target and use violence on the student council member being Ichinose. Now this is quite an interesting interaction, more for Nagumo than Sakinagi. Nagumo is willing to sit back and allow for violence and a member of his student council to be tormented. Because of this, it begs the question as to why. Why is he allowing this to happen? But even as the Ichinose stand that I am, I love the fact that Sakinagi along with Nagumo are jumping Ichinose. Even though I love Ichinose for the greater good of Sakinagi and Nagumo's character, I need her to be broken down badly, because I want them to be better than Ryuen and better antagonists and villains, especially with the way that the story portrays them out to be. So I'm willing to sacrifice my fan card of Ichinose to see her get beat up, if that means that they become better characters. Anyway, after the conversation Sakinagi had with Nagumo, the next person to walk in was Kushida, and I can't tell you how hyped I was when Kushida finally walked into the scene, because Kushida plus Nagumo, you know some nefarious things about to go down. And I'm just saying, Kushida the GOAT, but I'll get into that later. Anywho, let's move on to chapter 2. There are major key developments I want to go over from chapter 2. For one, that is Kei's breakup with Hirata. To speak specifically on who broke up with who, having Kei break up with Hirata is the best way to write the scenario, I believe, because having Kei break up with him instead of the other way around shows how Kei is starting to grow independent from the symbolism of host and parasite, which is a lot of character development for her. When we first seen Kei, she was a maleficent popular girl who exerted her dominance over others because of her popular in relationship to Hirata. But in actuality, this was actually all a facade to run away and protect herself from bullying. Then she met Ayana Koji during volume 4, and he essentially freed her from this scared mentality, and eventually over time she grew into her own newfound confidence. And it fully flourished when Ryuen attempted to bully her again, but at that time she had grown too tough. Then that brings us to where we are now, and that brings us to now where she doesn't need to latch onto anyone anymore. And she technically still does latch on to Ayana Koji, but it's more of a romance and love interest type of latch instead of a Kei's self-defense parasitic type of latch. But it is great to see Kei coming into her own. I'm looking forward to how she develops even further into the novel. The next moment I want to talk about, and which I'm really happy to talk about, but before I go that, Yamauchi is trash, just complete garbage. But during a moment in chapter 2, Yamauchi went to speak up, but he was stopped by Sudo and Ike, and this was during the moment when the breakup between Kei and Hirata had just happened. I love this moment so much because we see the developments of Sudo along with the small and subtle development of Ike, and how their development contrasts Yamauchi's lack of development. When it comes to those two, they were able to read the room and not interfere with the breakup between Hirata and Kei, showing how much the two of them have matured since the meeting of Horikita and Shinohara. Moving on to interaction that I hope would do something for one person's character in the party, and that is the altercation between Kanzaki and Hashimoto. You all know that I like Hashimoto from his display and relevance in volume 8, So he was good during this interaction, but from this altercation, I hope that Kanzaki will get some sort of development or at least something of a character other than being Ichinose's right hand. And I guess I got something, maybe, probably not really. But while Kanzaki was just being garbage, the true MVP of this moment came in, and that is Akito. He came in to stop the altercation between Kanzaki and Hashimoto, and we also got a little bit of lore on Akito. We have found out that he used to be a delinquent, and I'm so happy that we finally got something when it comes to Akito, because my problem with Akito was that out of everyone in the Ayano Koji group, he was the less developed and essentially lacks a character outside of his base characterization that he initially had. We have Sakura, who is slowly but surely opening herself up and being less shy. Then we have Hasabi, who thematically serves her role trying to make Ayano Koji into a better person. And then we have Yukimuro, who's much like Sakura is developing to be a lot more confident and social and also breaking into his own as a leader. However, when you look at Akito, he's just kind of there. He just insists upon the group. He doesn't really have anything, so I'm really grateful that we finally get something for Akito, at least. Moving towards chapter 3, the first thing to say, I like the movements of Hashimoto. It is good to see him tailing and following Ayano Koji, especially now that we know he's doing this of his own volition. Just like the character relevancy and curious to see what Hashimoto cooks up in the future. However, the more important thing to talk about is Michan. I was so happy when she came up in this volume. We learned about her in the last volume, so I was curious on how she would become relevant in this one. But for me, the unfortunate part was her relevancy being only a love interest for Hirata, which is fine in and of itself, but I was just hoping for something a little bit more. But however, I did like the backstory of Michan. It's pretty cool. After this, we go to Ichinose's strategy on how to deal with the rumors, which I thought was a good one because everything eventually fades with time, but I just want to add in a little tidbit. But to transition to a conversation between Horikita, Ayano Koji, and Ichinose, I like this dialogue, but however, when it comes to the dialogue between Ichinose, Horikita, and Ayano Koji, it was a bit underwhelming, but it was to be expected from what they said. I just thought more was going to be revealed, but the great part about this the dialogue between Horikita and Ayano Koji, because Ayano Koji was poking holes in Horikita's argument, in which is a great thing, and even he called her idealistic, proving and showing how much Horikita has changed since the earlier volumes, even stated by Ayano Koji. Nevertheless, though, it was a good conversation. But to end chapter 3, which got me extremely hyped, this was when Ayano Koji had got a phone call from someone unknown, and all they did was just say his name. Come to find out, from what Ayano Koji had said, it was his father, and this for me was amazing. It was perfect because now Ayano Koji's father is able to step in and become the villain that I feel that they're setting him up to be, along with the fact that he can probably test out his son's ability with Ayano Koji not wanting to be dragged back to the White Room. This is just a good display of him trying to test out his weapon that he created. I think that's it that I want to cover for chapter 3. So, I'm done with chapter 3, let's talk about chapter 4. Started off with everyone receiving the letter in their mailbox about Ichinose being a thief, simply adding more mystery on Ichinose's backstory. Next moment is Kamuro's conversation with Ayano Koji. First off, I just want to say I like Kamuro. I like the rude and entitled attitude. It's kind of cute, I find it interesting. But to specifically talk about something when it comes to Kamuro, that is her backstory. The interactions with Kamuro and Sakiyanagi is interesting, not because of Sakiyanagi, but because of the self-destructive nature that I think is Kamuro, because I found it funny how she was not afraid of the presence that Sakiyanagi emitted, especially with the way that the story builds up Sakiyanagi, and the fact that Kamuro is going to self-destruct on herself and tell on herself that she stole the beer. So I really enjoyed the backstory, but however, I do have a small smidget problem. I need to know or find out, what did Sakiyanagi do to quench Kamuro's kleptomania? Because she said that she quenched it, but it's like, what did she do to quench it? Because I don't understand how Kamuro necessarily got to Sakiyanagi's side and how she's able to work for her. I don't fully understand that all the way. I think I need that explained a lot more. But hey, for what we got, I still enjoyed the backstory. I guess let's skip a bunch of parts because there isn't particularly really much I have to say in terms of chapter 5, but we move on to chapter 6. Chapter 6 had a lot of heavy moments. First, let's talk about the narcissism of Hashimoto. I loved it. Amazing. Hearing Hashimoto's inner dialogue when he was given the chocolates and he didn't particularly care about the girl that gave it to him unless she was useful to him. I love that. It was like some Ayana Koji-esque type of wording. Because of this, it made Hashimoto go up even higher on my favorite male character list from Classroom Elite, so I really enjoyed that moment. Also, I like the straightforward approach of Hashimoto tailing Ayana Koji and pushing onto Kei in Ayana Koji's conversation. Hashimoto was able to sniff out the lie of Kei saying that she made the chocolate for Hirata, but after they broke up, she had it and decided to give it to Ayana Koji. However, he could have took it a step further in uncovering this lie, because it didn't make sense for Kei to have chocolate made for Hirata if she was the one that broke up with him. If you get what I mean? Because she obviously knew when she was going to break up with Hirata. That would mean she would have to had prepared these chocolates in advance. But it doesn't make sense if you know you're going to break up with Hirata. So why do you have these chocolates? That makes sense. Another aspect though of this conversation that I do like, that being Ayana Koji. I like the fact that Ayana Koji is about to change up the pace of the conversation to test Kei and see how well she does, and it will really show how much being around Ayana Koji has changed Kei. However though, it was quite disappointing because it didn't do any of the things that I felt that it was going to do. When he said he was going to change up the pace, he said one question and then shut up for the rest of the conversation. So it was very, very lackluster. Was not expecting it to be that toned down. Or I mean, I was expecting both of them to go back and forth, throwing out different wordings to mess each other up, and they both will have to catch each other, if you get what I mean. But to move on to the next aspect I want to touch on, that is Horikita. The growth and development from Horikita is amazing to see, along with the dynamic between Horikita and Ichinose. The fact that she is constantly keeping in contact with her shows the growth from what Horikita was in the beginning to what she is now. At first, she could care less about anyone but herself, but now she can't stop thinking about her friends, so it's good to see that final development. And I think with Horikita being sociable, the only thing that's left for her is her brother problem. Now, this story brings my attention to the biggest trash can, garbage dump of Classroom of the Elite. That is Yamauchi. He's just terrible, just awful. When he blatantly called out Shinohara for being a prostitute, I wish you all could have seen my face. I was like, bruh, are you serious? How you lack that much self-awareness? Like, I truly do hate Yamauchi. But that moment when he started calling out Shinohara about being a prostitute, I was like, bro, get this man out my story. Please, I can't. As for Ayana Koji, who had a pretty decent scene, he stated that he cares about Ichinose because that is his friend. But the worrying thing about this to me is, who is saying it? Is it the narrator Ayana Koji, or is the italics Ayana Koji? Because we all know they are two different people. Moving on to the next part, that is the meeting of all the classes. I'm glad Hiyori is getting a lot more screen time and is taking the role of leadership for Class D. Makes me like Hiyori a lot more. I also like the Akito screen time, but my only question is, why does he care so much about the class fight? Why is he caring so much if Class B is beefing with Class D, if beefing with Class A? Like, why? To me, it just doesn't make sense. I don't think they ever resolved that, and I don't think that's even in Akito's base kindness, but it's whatever. Also, there was one small moment, which is for Sakura, and it attributes more to her development. It was a small outburst that she had where she yelled during the whole group class fight, which just proves how much she's developed. The fact that she can actually speak and yell out loud. Also, Kanzaki. Trash dude. Just absolute garbage. Pure, just lackluster right hand. The worst right hand out of all the top tier smart characters in Classroom of the Elite. To move on to the next part and to run through it a bit, Sakinagi gets aggressive and confronts Ichinose, forcing her to reveal her backstory. And Ichinose's backstory was... where do I begin? My thoughts on Ichinose's backstory. Overall, it was okay, but underwhelming at parts. One problem I have is the lackluster of buzzwords or trigger words. For instance, when she claims she was a shoplifter and the item she stole was a hair clip. Starting with the shoplifter, the problem here is the fact that saying the word shoplifter carries too much of a happy tone to it. If we're talking about stealing and said character feels this bad about what they have done, then use a word like thief or kleptomaniac or theft or something. Those words are much better because those carry more of a negative connotation. As for the hair clip, it should have been a different item, and the hair clip is just too small and weird of an item for someone to feel as much guilt as she felt. Also, the amount of times that she actually stole the stuff, which was only once. It's like, do you really feel this much guilt over one stolen small item. It's just, I can understand why she felt that way, but it's like, bruh, it's just very underwhelming. Very, very underwhelming. She should have stolen much bigger things and have done it multiple times to feel the amount of guilt that was described on her. But the aspect of the backstory that I do enjoy is the amount of detail that is put into the despair, depression of Ichinose, along with how her mother handled the theft. I like all that. For me, it's just the word shoplifting and the hair clip itself was very underwhelming to use, and also with the amount of times that she actually did shoplift, which was only once. Overall, not bad, but kind of close to it. So the backstory just could have been better. The final moment of chapter 6 I want to speak on is the phone call that Ayano Koji made to a certain someone. They did not reveal who it was, but I have a very large feeling that it is Ryuen. I just feel it. I know that he got in contact with the vice president in the next chapter, but I don't believe he really made that call to the vice president. It just, for some reason, in my being, in my core, my theory, I just feel that it is Ryuen. So I really hope they reveal who that person was, unless it was the vice president. But with all that, that ends chapter 6. To move on lastly to chapter 7, which ends the volume. We get the perspective of everything that Ayano Koji did behind the scenes. It was cool to see everything from his perspective, but I only want to talk about the GOAT. That is Kushida. Kushida is the GOAT. We gotta sit down one day and just have a talk about how the only person in this series who can have Ayano Koji on the ropes, that is Kushida Kikyo. I'm telling you, she's the only person who ever has Ayano Koji on the ropes. From the rape case with the uniform to the test scores in volume 6, which I know he had the whole plan, blah blah blah. I understand that. Let me just get happy real quick for her. Next to this volume where she had 2 recordings the entire time and got Ayano Koji on both of them. Like, at a certain point, we have to start having a dialogue about the psychological intelligence of Kushida Kikyo, because out of everyone in Classroom Elite, the only one to ever get Ayano Koji on the ropes and get him sweating is her. She's the only person. But I absolutely adored the scene, on top of the way that they depicted and described Kushida's information network. That was amazing to see how much she knew, and I loved it. I don't really have much to say on the ending portion of this chapter. As I said, it was just cool to see Ayano Koji's perspective and see how he dealt with things behind the scenes and things like that. But I do like Nagumo's plan of wanting to break down Ichinose so that he can build her up. I like that. He on his Ayano Koji type stuff. I like it. But other than that, that pretty much does it for the review. I hope you all have enjoyed this review. Volume 9 was good. Had some problems. It was shaky, but it did stick the landing, I would say, for the most part. I hope you all have enjoyed the review. Thank you all for watching. Follow me on Twitter. Link is in the description, along with the Discord to join. I think that link works in the description, so that you can join the Discord and we can discuss more Classroom Elite, so I can explain to you and express to you why Kushida Kikyo is the GOAT and the top 3 Classroom Elite girl. Thank you all for watching, and like, comment, and subscribe, and goodbye.